Hello, ladies, gentlemen, and the gender non-conforming. Today I'm going to be doing a tier list of every Star Wars movie. This is kind of just a test to see what I want to do for content on this channel and just in general. Also, it just gives me a excuse to talk about Star Wars. I will be doing this in order from the original to the sequels, then the miscellaneous, and then the prequels, and then the sequels. You know what I'm talking about. Alright, so episode 4, A New Hope. This movie is obviously where it all started, 1977. It is. What cannot be said about this movie, and what could also be said about the movie that a lot of people don't talk about. So I'm putting this in great. You might see that's blasphemy because it's the original. It should be a masterpiece, right? It's great. I love this movie to death. Don't get me wrong, but age does do things to this movie. Even with the special editions, some stuff is weird. Adding in Jabba, with CGI, adding in Boba was weird. I'm not a hater of the special editions. I love the special editions, but that was a weird thing to add. But come on, what cannot be said about this movie? It is fantastic. It is what it started. The entire franchise. I absolutely adore this movie. My favorite part of this movie is just probably anything to do with Luke beginning the journey. Like when he finds out about Leia, when he gets R2 and C3PO, that's kind of the highlight of the movie for me. I know a lot of people really highlight the ending with the Death Star blowing up, the trench run, or even a little bit of the middle where they're getting inside of the Death Star and everything, and that's really cool. But um, I do think there's a little jank in this movie, just a little bit, but it is the first one, so like I'm not disrespecting the movie. I think by putting it in great, it is absolutely amazing. I'm not saying it's bad by any means. Even if I put something in mediocre, I don't think it's bad. I think that it is just not what it should have been. I think Empire Strikes Back. If you know me, Empire is a masterpiece. It has everything that a Star Wars movie needs. Amazing action, romance, a lot of emotions. Everything in this movie is iconic. Everything. You have the Battle of Hoth. You have the infamous Vader and Luke scene. You have Lando Calrissian, my second favorite Star Wars character of all time. You have everything you need in this movie. It is fantastic, and the ending is, um, I say, probably the saddest ending to be left off of besides Episode 3. It is, you got everything going on. You got the Han and Carbonite. You got Luke without his hand. You're like, what the fuck's gonna happen next? I think it's a masterpiece. It has everything you need, and John Williams, he just put his all into that soundtrack. He really did. Episode 6. Okay, so episode 6. Um, there's really no reason to not put it in masterpiece. It's fantastic. Like I said, it's the quintessential. I think this and Empire are the quintessential Star Wars movies. I think you could watch either one of these without even watching this one, which you should watch this one. Why would you not? But I'm just saying, if you're like, man, what is Star Wars about? Watch one of these. You could just start off with one of these and be like, okay, that's Star Wars. You're kind of missing out on a whole bunch of stuff, but you know. But yeah, Empire is fucking godly, and so was Return of the Jedi. So Return of the Jedi, the most the thing that stands out to me the most in this movie is definitely the very beginning when Luke shows up in dark clothing. You're like, what the hell? Why is Luke wearing all this? Why is he choking Gamorrean guards? Has he turned to the dark side? Did Vader get to him? No, he's just a goddamn badass. He was training, and he's become more confident, and I love that. And it has my favorite lightsaber duel in all of the franchise: Vader versus Luke in front of Palpatine in the throne room. Also, like, this is the ending of Anakin's story. Anakin has fulfilled what he was sought to do, which is bring balance to the Force. Um, and he killed Palpatine, and that was great. It was fantastic. The ending is extremely sad. But then it's also very rewarding when you see the very end. We see Force Ghost Anakin with Obi-Wan and Yoda. It's fantastic. Hayden Christensen in the later ones, in the special edition, and then Sebastian Shaw in the original, which they're both great. I love them both. It is kind of weird. It's like, why is Anakin young now? But it's understandable. That's where Anakin, quote unquote, died, right? But I love this movie. It is fantastic. Okay. So that's the original trilogy. You got 2 in Masterpiece, 1 in Great. Now, here we go for the prequels. I am not a prequel hater. I love the prequels. I watched it as much as I could as a kid. Same with the originals. I watched the original first, then the prequels as a kid. Masterpiece. Okay, so probably like, why the hell is episode 1 in Masterpiece? It has Jar Jar Binks in it. Yes, it has Jar Jar. But Jar Jar's not a bad character. I don't care what anyone says. He was a funny thing when I was a kid. Even now, watching him, I'm like, he's dumb. Like, that's the entirety of his like, the joke of the character is he's just a comic relief, silly, weird guy. And I think it was really funny. This movie has so much cool stuff in it, and it really built the Star Wars galaxy. It's a Star Wars universe. It added a lot. You see Coruscant, Naboo, Tatooine. You see a lot of planets in the movie. And you really see a lot of different aliens and stuff, especially when you're on Tatooine. It is really cool. It introduces 2 of my favorite Star Wars characters of all time, Qui-Gon Jinn and Darth Maul. Qui-Gon Jinn, what is not to be said about him? He is my second favorite Jedi of all time, and he's definitely up there with my top 5 characters probably. I love him to death. It really sucks that he had to pass in this movie, but it's understandable for the narrative that George was trying to do with the prequels. And my favorite scene in the movie actually doesn't include Qui-Gon, is when he's talking to the council to let Anakin be trained. It's really cool. I love it to death. And not to mention, I mean, just look at Darth Maul. Darth Maul's design, they were in their bag when they created Darth Maul's design. Come on now, he looks fucking badass. The Zabrak species is really, really cool. And not to mention that the lightsaber fight and just Darth Maul's fighting style in general, Ray Park's amazing choreography that they did in this movie. My second favorite lightsaber fight in all of Star Wars is in this movie. It is great. The pod racing scene, really, really cool. It makes sense. Like, why would they not race like the equivalent of cars in Star Wars' universe? It makes sense. It's really cool. And yeah, I think it's such an underrated movie. I really do. It has some tiny slow parts, but I really, really like it. Here is episode 2. Yeah, that's a mediocre. Okay, so why is episode 2 a mediocre? It has a lot of cool stuff, and one of my favorite scenes in the entire franchise is in this movie with Anakin. But the dialogue and how the pacing is in this movie kind of kills it sometimes for me. I've seen this movie a lot, and every time I kind of cringe a little bit at some of the dialogue, but it's funny because it's not really Anakin's dialogue that makes me cringe. For some reason, it's kind of Padme's. I don't know. I just really, really want to like this movie more, but the pacing is kind of weird. But let's talk about like the plot in general. You have Sifo Dyas, ordering the clone army and all that stuff, and you have Jango Fett. George Lucas really had an act for killing really cool characters off in these movies, because you have Qui-Gon and technically Maul, even though he comes back later in episode 1. But in episode 2, you get rid of Jango. Why would you get rid of Jango? He is so cool. I think they could have kept him around for a little bit longer. I understand that, why would you keep the bounty hunter around that created the clones? He was kind of there just to segue into the clones, which is understandable, but come on now. The lightsaber fighting in this movie is really cool. Obviously, Anakin and Obi-Wan versus Dooku was really cool. That's how Anakin lost his hand. That's really neat. Also, Yoda fights for the first time in this movie, and when I was a kid and I watched that, oh my, I went off the walls when I first saw that. I didn't know Yoda could fight like that. It was really, really cool. Anakin in this movie is fantastic. Hayden Christensen, he is the perfect actor to play Anakin. He does everything so well. He's supposed to be this weird guy. Like, I don't like when people are like, "Man, I hated Hayden Christensen's portrayal of the character. He did it wrong. He's weird and cringy." No, no, no. You don't understand Anakin's character. That's what Anakin's supposed to be. He's supposed to be a weird, cringy guy that gives off school shooter vibes because he doesn't know how to control his emotions, and he's also been sheltered. He's been in this cult, religious organization for how many years, and he's living with one guy that's almost like his father figure slash brother to him. It's understandable that he's kind of weird to Padme, but yeah, and like the moment where he slaughters the Tuscans, the Sand People, it is so good. His delivery of when he's talking to Padme about what he did, chef kiss. Really, 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 really great. Definitely one of my favorite moments in all of the Star Wars. It is so good. Also, not to mention, this gave us the clones. Phase 1, Clone Trooper is really cool. I actually prefer Phase 1 over Phase 2. But yeah, it's mediocre. It has some downer moments. Episode 3, like, how could you not put this in Masterpiece or Great? If you put this below Great, you're weird. Yeah, this is Masterpiece. What cannot be said about this movie? So, Episode 3 has my third favorite lightsaber fight. I'm not going to rank every lightsaber fight, but Anakin and Obi-Wan at the very end is fantastic. Okay, so let's talk about something that's always stood out to me in this movie is the opening. The battle over Coruscant. The battle over Coruscant is so fucking cool visually. It is awesome. It is one of my favorite things that has been shown in a Star Wars movie, just in general. And the limitations that they'd had, in the early 2000s, it still holds up. It still looks fantastic. Seeing Anakin, seeing how much he's grown from 2 to 3. He's got the longer hair, and he just is more mature. It's really, really badass. I love it. And in the beginning, you get a pretty neat lightsaber fight. You get Dooku, who just washed Obi-Wan and Anakin last movie, and he's fighting them in this movie. And as a kid watching it, I did not expect Anakin to kill Dooku. It really is a turning point for his character. He definitely doesn't want to do it. He knows it's not the Jedi way, but it overcomes him, and it's really great. Also, another thing in this movie that is, I feel like more people talk about it now, but definitely not when it really came out, is it is the saddest Star Wars movie for multiple reasons. But yeah, Order 66, seeing all those cool Jedi that you've grown to love just watching the Clone Wars, even though this came out before the Clone Wars, it is really sad. A death that hits you more in this movie than you would probably think it would, at least in my opinion, is Plo Koon. Plo Koon was killed by clone troopers. And if you've watched the Clone Wars, you know how much Plo Koon cared about the clones, saw them as individual people, saw them as people that weren't just soldiers, and it was really, really sad to see him go. He gets blown up in a starship, he gets blown up, and it's absolutely terrible. Ki-Adi-Mundi getting shot down on Magneto, it's all sad. You got Aayla Secura on Felucia. It's very sad watching all of that. These clones that the Jedi put their life in their hands, and they get turned on. It's really, really sad. But in another thing in Episode 3 that everyone obviously talks about is Anakin's fall, how he becomes Darth Vader, and how a lot of that obviously just takes place in this movie. But the implication that Anakin would have done anything, literally anything, just for Padme not to die was really, 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 really heartfelt. This movie gives you a lot of sad moments, a lot of epic moments too, but just all sad all around. I think the battle between Obi-Wan and Anakin is the most, I would say, heartfelt fight, but then again, Anakin versus Obi-Wan, it was fantastic. It was most heartfelt, but also Luke versus Vader in Episode 6, I would say, is probably you can interchange it for the most heartfelt battle in Star Wars. is really good. I love episode 3. What cannot be said about it? Really? Come on now. I'm going to get to these later. Let's go on to the sequel era. I'm not a sequel hater, but I do have my opinions about these movies. Mediocre. Okay, so episode 7, The Phantom Menace. This is mediocre. This is the first Star Wars movie I've ever seen in theaters. I was born in 2000, so these movies I could not have seen the original trilogy in theaters, and I just missed out on the prequels. But I've seen this movie quite a few times. The first time I saw it, I wanted to say it was my favorite Star Wars movie, because it was the hype and everything. Seeing my favorite characters back on screen again, seeing cool new characters. Let's just talk about elephant in the room. Han dies. Han Solo dying in this movie is not bad. I think it was actually a pretty cool idea to kill off the original trilogy characters, and it was kind of inevitable the way the franchise was going. These people are getting old. They're going to die in real life at some point anyways. So killing him off, it made sense. Let's also talk about Kylo. Kylo Ren is my favorite character, tied with Finn probably, in the whole movie, but also just in the trilogy. I really, really love Kylo. It's in the entire movie, you can pay attention to him, and you can see that he's fighting inside of his mind. You know, he doesn't really know what to do. Just like he said, basically to Han, is like, I know what I must do, and stuff like that. And it's really sad. But I think this movie isn't the greatest. I think Rey in this movie is really boring. Poe is boring. Finn is the best character in this movie, tied with Kylo, and that's kind of it. You got Maz, which is a neat character. Chewie and Han, I mean, they're just themselves. They're great, and Leia's really great too. But and the visuals in this movie are fantastic. BB-8, just a funny little droid, just like R2. Like, it's kind of the same. Not to mention that the plot of this movie is very similar to Episode 4, but that's not a bad thing, because Episode 4 is a great movie. I understand that, like, redoing, like, oh, it's a big space station thing that can blow up multiple planets. Hey, they also did that in Episode 6, and you don't complain about that movie, do you? So, I don't know. I'm not really trying to defend it as much as some people will, but it's an okay movie. I still like it. I still enjoy watching it. I don't think there's much more to say about it. Also, seeing Finn, I will say though, seeing Finn wield a lightsaber, awesome, amazing. Okay, episode 8. Some people will put it here. Some people will put it here. I'm one of the few people who will not put it here. I won't put it here. I won't put it here, but I'm going to put it here. Okay, so episode 8 is a masterpiece. A lot of people will hate me for saying that, but everything about this movie I love so much. I love the story of Luke. I love the story of Kylo. Rey's is okay. Leia's part of this movie is really cool. I'm going to talk about the negative parts first of this movie. It's anything to do with Rose and Finn, but that's not because I hate Rose and I hate Finn. No, I think that obviously the actor and the actresses are fantastic. They do great. Kelly Marie Tran's fantastic, and so is Don Boyega. But I just do not care for the casino stuff in this movie. You can take all of that out in this movie, which still be top tier for me. There's really nothing that it adds to this at all. I think that's kind of the weakest part of the entire movie, and that was it. And the thing for me is, like, I just don't care about it. It's not like I hate it so much that it lowers the movie down at all. It just is okay. And we'll talk about Leia doing the Force, like, jump thing through the It's weird. It is weird. But I can understand it, because Anakin was her father. Like, he is Force, right? Like, he is... I can get it. I can get behind it. It's weird, but I can get behind it. Let's talk about my favorite parts of this movie. Anything to do with Luke. Luke is the highlight of this movie, tied with Kylo. I think Luke in this movie is absolutely fantastic, and I still think to this day that he is true to his character in the original trilogy. I do not care what anyone says. Episode 8 did not ruin his character. He has always been a character who has fought inside of himself. Even in episode 6, you can see the turmoil in his mind. You see him get angry. You see him kind of dip maybe a little bit into the dark side when he's fighting Vader. When Vader mentioned Princess Leia, it's, and his sister. Like, it's fantastic. I still love what they did with his character. Now, let's talk about the other highlight of this entire movie, Adam Driver. Adam Driver as Kylo Ren is just fantastic. I love this character so much. I love the way that he's portrayed in this movie over episode 7. Definitely give him more character, even in episode 7, where he had a little bit of character, actually, surprisingly. And the way that he hates Luke and how he wants to fight Luke, it's fantastic. I love it. And Rey in this movie is cool. She still doesn't really have an identity or a character, but that's kind of her character, is she's trying to find who she is, and with her parents as well. I do think that the fighting in this movie is really good as well. The Snoke throne room fight against all the guards is really, really cool. And what they do with lightsabers in this movie is neat. And mainly in all these other movies, like, you've seen normal lightsaber fights where it's just kind of like sword fighting where they're just clashing the sabers together. But in this movie, they do a little more unique stuff. Especially when they're fighting all the guards in the room. Like, turning the lightsaber on in that dude's face was really cool, and all that stuff is really neat. I think the ending of this movie is really, really good. I love episode 8. And Rian Johnson is just underrated. He deserves more. The hate that this movie got is so bizarre. It's not number 1, but it's up here. I do enjoy this movie quite a bit. Okay, talk about episode 9. Episode 9. It's definitely going in bad. I don't like this movie. It has one or two cool things that I absolutely adore. It's probably one of my favorite things in the franchise, but I say that a lot about these movies. Like, oh, this is my favorite thing in the franchise. But episode 9 is terrible, terrible pacing. Nothing about the pacing in this movie is good. The beginning is way too fast. It's going beat to beat to beat, way too fast. And then it slows down and gets kind of slow. And it's really weird. I don't like that. I think they ruined Finn's character in this movie, which was admittedly preluded to in this movie. Poe, he didn't do anything, and he's still boring. I am a Poe and Finn shipper, but they don't do anything in this movie either. And, like, the fact that Finn is confirmed to be Force sensitive, and they're trying to tell you that in this movie, and they don't even get it out in the movie. That's extremely stupid. I hate it. I really do. But let's talk about the best part of this movie is, again, just like episode 8, Adam Driver as Kylo Ren. This movie is carried by him so hard. If for some reason Kylo wasn't in this movie, this would be Burn My Eyes, Please Kill Me Now, right? But Adam Driver, Kylo Ren, Ben Solo, he is peak in this movie. The fight between him and Rey, like right here in the poster on this like scaffold, is so good. I love everything about his character in this movie. Also, let's talk about the other thing that is very big when you like. Why? How can you not talk about this in this movie? Palpatine's back, somehow, right? I guess I saw it coming when Snoke died in episode 8, which was really stupid, by the way. But when Snoke died in episode 8, I really didn't know where they were going to go with episode 9. Until we saw that trailer, and you hear Palpatine. You're like, what the hell? Why is Palpatine back? How is he back? But then again, it's Palpatine. I can understand why he's back now, because it's Palpatine. He's the strongest Sith to ever exist. and you knew that he had a kind of a backup plan anyways from Legends when he died with the clones, and then they kind of brought that over. I'm not a big fan of it because I definitely would have preferred Snoke or Kylo to be the big bad of this trilogy and not another Palpatine. But he's here, and I do love the visuals of this movie, but the visuals can't do everything for the movie. Palpatine does look really cool when he's like all decrepit and everything at the beginning and the end of this film. I do hate that he is in this film, though. Let's talk about Rey being related to Palpatine. It's fine. I don't really care for it, but I don't hate it. I still love Rey as a character. She's cool. I think her being a nobody, like it was kind of maybe alluded to in 8 and in 7 as well. I would have liked that a lot more if they just kind of said, yeah, you're nobody, but the Force picked you, and I love that idea. But the fact that she's a Palpatine is kind of annoying. Kind of doesn't really make too much sense in a weird way, because you're like, why would Palpatine just let his son go? I don't know, it's kind of weird. But it is what it is. I still think this movie has some cool moments. My favorite moment in this entire movie and the entire trilogy, it might be tied with Luke, force projecting himself to fight Kylo in Episode 8. But is Kylo confronting Han, or I guess Han confronting Kylo, and them talking, and it was very similar to how it was in Episode 7, and that is amazing. I love the callback to that. It is great. That really is the peak of this movie, and that's the only reason it's not down here, is because of 2 moments in this movie, and they both are just kind of the highlights of the movie. The Kylo and Han stuff, and then Luke being a Force ghost, and talking to Rey. That was definitely peak as well. Like, I loved that so much in this movie. I saw this in theaters, and this was kind of the first Star Wars movie where I was like, do I like it? Because every other Star Wars movie I've seen in theaters, or just seen in general, after watching it, I was like, yes, of course I like the movie. But I was like, do I like Episode 7 as much as I like this? Or vice versa, I was to say. Do I like Episode 9 as much as I like 7 and 8? No, I don't. It's not a very good movie. Pacing kills it. Some dumb stuff is in this movie. I wish they had a complete plan for this trilogy. It really is just put into perspective how 9 and 8 even were produced, that they had absolutely no idea what they were doing with this trilogy, and it's really sad. Episode 9 could have been one of the best Star Wars movies ever exist. Same with, I still think 8 is a masterpiece, but it has a lot of wrong with it. Same with 7. Yeah, that's okay. It's bad. It's a bad movie. Star Wars Clone Wars, 2008. First animated film of Star Wars. We've had animated stuff before this, but this is the first animated film. It's in great. And it has some really cool stuff in it. I like the visuals of what they could have done in 2008, for 3D animation. It still looks pretty good. And I love the Clone Wars. Really cool. Ahsoka, this is the introduction of Ahsoka. When I was a kid, I didn't really like her. I'm not gonna lie. I was like, oh, she's kind of annoying, but she's okay. It's whatever. Now she's one of my favorite characters in all of the franchise. I think that this movie is pretty good. There's not too much I can really say about it, besides, like, some of the plot is a little weird. But you do get Christopher Lee coming back to reprise his role as Count Dooku, and that was fantastic. I do love that. His voice is so good for the character. I really, really like that. And also Matt Lanner and James Arnold Taylor, they do so good as these characters. They do so good. James Arnold Taylor, you can tell that he really studied Aaron McGregor for the role that he's trying in this. And Matt Lanner, it's weird because you can say that this Anakin is different than this Anakin, right? You can say Clone Wars Anakin is different from Episode 3 or 2 Anakin. But they are the same character, and it still makes sense. I still think that It is very unfair to compare the both. I think it's kind of rude, because they're the same character but kind of slightly different portrayals, but they still work very well together. I really, really like Matt Lantern's Anakin, and I've spent more time with this Anakin, Matt Lantern's Anakin, because I've seen every episode of the Clone Wars multiple times, and Hayden's only in 2 movies, right? So, like, you get a few hours of Anakin, live action Anakin, and then you get multiple hours of Clone Wars Anakin, and you grow with him more. I think it's kind of unfair to put them together. It is kind of rude, but I do really like this movie. Seeing Jabba the Hutt again was neat, and like animation's cool. The Clone Wars in general, like Christoph says at the very beginning of the movie, is really, really cool visionary like aspect of Star Wars. Like the planet is really cool, and I like the fighting. It was pretty cool. I say cool a lot, but that's just how it is. Okay, Rogue One, masterpiece. Everything that can be said about this movie is this movie rides on the characters more so than any other Star Wars movie, in my opinion, because you don't know anybody in this. You don't know anybody in this movie. And that was really important. Because with the sequel trilogy, you knew Han, you knew Chewie, you knew Leia, and it added new characters, but you didn't know anybody in Rogue One. And it's really cool seeing what they did with these characters. Jyn Erso is my second favorite female character in all Star Wars, and I think Andor, like the show is actually going on while I'm recording this. It hasn't finished yet. It's like in the middle. I love Andor, and Cassian in this movie is so good. I love everything about this movie, and the visuals of this movie are the best in any movie, I think, in my opinion. Yeah, I'll say that. I love the visuals in this movie. Scarif is so cool. Jakku is amazing. I really, really like this movie. And it makes sense in the fact that, like, they had to get the Death Star planned somehow, and it makes sense that they got it that way. And in the very end, it goes right into episode 4. Like, right there. It's so good. I love it. Solo. It's not burning my eyes. I'm just kind of thinking. It's in mediocre. But it's not a bad movie. Anything in mediocre is not a bad movie. This is the only bad thing. I don't really care all that much for a lot of things in this movie, but it's still really cool, and it's still really good. The actor that they got to play Han, young Han, is really, really good. I like him. He feels like Harrison Ford to me. And same with Donald Glover. Donald Glover as Lando Calrissian, my second favorite Star Wars character ever, by the way. He has fantastic vibes. Like, he feels like Billy D. Williams, and is great. I just think that, the visuals in the movie are really good. I do like those. I just think the plot in general was okay. How Han got his name was kind of silly. Like, the lady that he was with, like, I don't really care. Seeing Maul again in live action was really, really cool. That was a peak part of this movie. Also, just seeing Chewie in general. Come on, it's Chewie. He's an adorable character. I just don't really care much for the plot of this movie. And I will say, I think Solo, even though it's great, it's still good, but I think the soundtrack for Solo is the weakest out of every Star Wars movie to come out. It was okay. It didn't really do all that much for me. I think this is a pretty good... Yeah, I don't know if I would put this a greater or mediocre. I just think the plot was mid, and the pacing was a little weird in the beginning. I think it was kind of slow in the beginning. I'm gonna keep it a mediocre, but honestly, I could put it great or mediocre. I'm gonna keep it a mediocre though, just because of the pacing and the plot I didn't really care for. Seeing the Kessel Run was neat. Lando, it's always great when we get more Lando. Yeah. I'm gonna keep that there. Okay, so this is my definitive Star Wars movies ranking. I dig right Star Wars, right? So that's why all these are up here, bro. Like, I cannot just put any of these below Masterpiece. Episode 9's not very good. I don't like it, so that's why that's in bad. Nothing will be in Burn My Eyes. This was almost in Burn My Eyes, but it had a few scenes that lifted up to. It's just a bad movie. I will do the series later. Plus, there's Visions and Book of Boba Fett in Andor when that finishes. Also, Tales of the Jedi is coming out soon. I am so excited for that. Also, Bad Batch coming back as well. So this is a little bit of an outdated list, but I am very excited to have more Star Wars in the future. This was kind of a test to see what I wanted to do with the channel for content. I kind of just had an excuse to talk about what I liked in every Star Wars movie and what I didn't like. And I could talk about Star Wars for the end of time, but I'm not gonna bore all of you with that. If you liked this, please like, comment, subscribe. If you didn't, I don't care. So, if you have any recommendations for other tier lists, other things I will do, I will probably do more tier lists, more Star Wars ones definitely. Like I said, I'll probably do the series at some point, and I wouldn't mind doing other stuff that I love. I'm a big Godzilla fan. It'd be really cool to do every Godzilla movie. There's a lot more of those than there is Star Wars. I love Dragon Ball and anime, so maybe I could do Dragon Ball arcs tier list where I can rank all the arcs, and maybe rank anime. Who we'll see. I also play a lot of video games. If you guys want to see me play video games, just recommend a game, maybe I'll play it. I play really anything, doesn't really matter. Also, follow my social media, they'll be down in the description. I'm very active on Twitter. I don't stream very often on Twitch, but I'll probably keep trying to do that later this year. Yeah, and I'll see all of you in the next video. Hopefully you have a fantastic day. Goodbye.